So let's return to the function that we touched on during data conversion, which was the cast function. I mentioned that it's a particularly powerful function, and we're going to use that in conjunction with the type of operation we saw earlier where we were dividing by integers. So if we go to Object Explorer, I'll show you the table that we're going to work with, and it's right down here in production.workOrder, and we're going to query some of these columns. So we'll start a new query window, and we'll type this query. Okay, so we've got a couple of columns here of some interest. There's order quantity, and then there's scrapped quantity. Like, for example, this particular order here, which the order was for 240, but in the course of production, 4 units had to be scrapped. So let's say we're interested in a report of the proportion of an order's quantity that ends up getting scrapped. In other words, it's the scrap quantity divided by order quantity there. Okay, well, we're interested only in the ones that actually have a scrap quantity, so let's just narrow things down by putting in a where condition where scrap quantity does not equal 0. I've taken the liberty of putting in another condition where scrap quantity is not null, because if it was null and we compared it to 0, that actually wouldn't hold true and it wouldn't return the ones we want. So generally in these situations, it's always good to eliminate the possibility of a null. So let's just see what that gets us. Okay, nothing but scrap quantities there. Now, to make life easy, I'm going to take the two columns we're interested in, that's going to be part of our expression, order quantity and scrap quantity, and put them on the far left. Okay, now let's say we're interested in the ratio of scrapped quantity to order quantity, and we just simply get that by dividing that by that, and we want it expressed as some sort of a percentage. Ultimately, that's what we want. So let's give that a go, and we'll put it on its own line here. Okay, and we'll execute that and see what happens. What does that get us? Right, now we've got the same problem that we saw when we were dividing our quantities on the production table, where we were dividing those integer columns by an integer factor, and the result was an integer. So this touches upon the data conversion rules. If we have one input and the other input, the same data type, the result is going to be the same data type. The only way to prevent that is if one of those operands in the equation is of a higher rating data type in the scheme of data conversion. So for example, if that was a decimal, then that would end up being a decimal. But it's not. So what do we do? Well, we can actually convert these to a decimal or any other data type we like within certain restrictions. And so that can manipulate the results in data type that we want. We can do that with a command called cast. So let's say we want our result here to be have 4 decimals. So we'll convert that to a decimal value with 4 decimal points on the end. Well, first I'm going to demonstrate casting just by putting the cast result on its own line in its own column, just using order quantity as an example. So I'll start a new line. I'll put order quantity there. And this is how we would cast it. So my keyword, the command cast, the value that we are casting, and the syntax is as and a new data type. So I'm going to specify decimal 10,4. Close brackets as order QTY dec, meaning decimal. So let's just see how that works. Check that out. We have got the order quantity, but this time it's got decimals on the end because it is a decimal data type. So let's just apply what we've learned to our little ratio expression up the top here and convert that factor in the equation, order quantity, convert that to a decimal. Great, and this has given us exactly what we were after, the ratio of scrapped to the total order expressed as a decimal, which we can interpret as a percentage if we want. So for example, this one is telling us that the 0.025 of the entire order was scrapped, which equates to 2.5%. You can see what's happening here. That was a decimal. Decimals are higher up the hierarchy in terms of data conversion over integers, which is what that is. And that means decimal, integer, decimal wins out. The result is a decimal. Now, we could have, for completeness, cast that as a decimal as well, but we really don't have to. As long as one element is of the higher ranking data type, then we get that higher ranking type as the result, which is what we want. Now, I am going to very quickly Control Z my way backwards to put the query back the way it was before we introduce cast here, just to demonstrate a particular trap. So I'll just go, there we go. Now, I'm going to show you the wrong way to use cast in this situation. Okay, now that might look like exactly the same thing, but is it? Let's just see the result. No, it's not. Where's all our decimals gone? Well, what's happened is the system has done exactly what we told it to do. It did this operation in the brackets first, which was integer divided by an integer, and what's that going to be? An integer, a big fat 0. So if you cast a 0 as a decimal, what's it going to be? It's going to be a 0 with just a bunch of zeros tacked on the end. So that's not the way to do it. We've got to be a little bit granular with our casts to get what we want. So I've put that expression back the way it should be in order to get our decimals. But if we want that expressed as a percentage, as you can probably work out, it's as simple as just multiplying that by 100 to get it expressed as such. So I will just do that. I'll surround the entire expression with brackets and simply times it by 100. And you know what? I'll just put that on its own line there, just so it's a little bit easier to read. And there we go. That's a bit more meaningful. 2.5% there, 1.78% there. You get the idea. Feel free to save this if you like, perhaps for later reference. And we'll put it under Management Studio, under perhaps a folder called casting, or wherever you want. And we'll call that casting.sql. Now, the cast function can also be very handy when dealing with text strings. Now, I'm going to use that involving a text string here. Let's say the business requirement is to come up with a column that is a piece of text that is going to be a label dropped on a crystal report, and it is going to be a plain English description about the scrapped quantity, and it's going to read scrapped quantity, whatever the quantity is, units were scrapped, 3 units were scrapped, that sort of thing. Now, let's start off by just putting scrap quantity right over the left-hand side here, just to make things easy when we start comparing things. And then on the next row, I'm going to put this expression. Now, before I start concatenating, let's just go over to the columns in the Object Explorer, columns for production.work order, and let's just double check scrapped quantity. Scrapped quantity is small int. Okay, let's just remember that. So we're coming over here, scrapped quantity, and we're going to concatenate it to a piece of text. But before we do that, instead of putting the proper label units were scrapped, I'm going to put a number. You may think I'm crazy. There is a reason I'm doing this, to prove a point. So let's just give the expression a name. Okay, what is that going to get us? Okay, what's happening? Now, because we're intending to concatenate, and that is a string, as you can see, you would kind of think that that would read the quantity, scrap quantity, whatever it is, 1 and a 2 tacked onto the end. So you would think there would just be 1, 2, 1 and a 2 run together. Well, it's not, it's a 3. And neither is that. That's not 3, 2, that's actually a 5. So what's actually happened, it's done an arithmetic calculation adding the numeral that is 2 to that quantity. Now what's happened, it's to do with the data type precedence that we discussed earlier in the course. Now that is a varchar, take it as read, that's a varchar. That is a small int, we saw that a second ago. So how do they rank in the data type precedence stakes, so to speak? Well, let's go back to the web page where it's discussed. Okay, so this is the data type precedence page. Where do we stand? Well, there's our varchar way down the bottom. And if we go to our small int, oh look, that's further up the chain at number 17. So literally a small int beats a varchar, sort of like a bit like poker really, isn't it? But if we come back here, because a small int beats a varchar, in other words, that gets converted to that. So it converts that 2 to a small int, and then adds that small int, that is 2, to the quantity, and that's exactly what we saw down here. 1 had 2 added to it to arrive at 3. So what happens if we actually put in the proper text value that we wanted in the first place? What is going to happen? Oh dear, we've got an error. And the error reads, conversion failed when converting the varchar value units were scrapped, that's this guy up here, to data type small int. So it's tried to do the same thing again. It's tried to convert that to a number, a small int, and it's completely failing. It worked when it was 2, but that's not going to cut it. I mean, that's obviously not a number. So to get us out of this mess, we've got to use cast. What we really want is, we don't want that converted to a number. We want the other way around. We want that converted to a piece of text. So cast can help us out. So let's do it. Let's just give it a nice big number, say, or 100, just to be safe. So to follow the nomenclature of cast, that is value, the as, and what we're converting it to, and close brackets. So let's see what happens. And you know what? I'm just going to put that on its own line there. And let's see what happens. Brilliant. That has worked. The scrapped quantity is now in a piece of text that says 1 units were scrapped, 3 units were scrapped. Great, cast has helped us out again. So cast has proved that it can kind of be a Swiss Army knife kind of function. It can help us out in a lot of situations and convert almost any value to any other kind of value within reason. So let's just recap what we've learned about the cast function. The syntax is cast, the column or expression that we intend to be converted, as, and the destination data type, defined as you normally would, and the closing bracket. Now that's subject to some constraints. We can't, for example, convert a letter to a number, but apart from that, cast is a very powerful tool indeed. And it's assignment time again. So I'll get you to download the file assignment2.zip, and inside you will find the business requirements in assignment2.pdf. So read those and design a query and get some results. And I've offered a suggested solution in the file assignment2suggestedsolution.sql and my results from that solution in assignment2results.xlsx.